All right, if you take a look at number 7, here we're going to graph the function 5 sine x. So by this point, hopefully you're pretty good at picking out the amplitude and the period, because those are really the two most important things that you need to have picked out initially before you graph it. So your amplitude is just going to be the number that's in front of your sine or cosine. So in this case, the amplitude is 5. All right, and then the period is going to come from taking 2 pi and dividing it by the number that's in front of x, which in this case there is no number, so we'll put a 1 there. So the period for this function is going to be 2 pi. When you go to graph these, whatever the period is, make this your 4th tick mark label, no matter what. Even if it seems kind of awkward, like we might do some later on where the period is 3. And it's like, it feels so weird to make that 4th tick mark 3, but just trust me, we're going to make the 4th tick mark whatever the period is. And something that you have to keep in mind for these graphs is it's all based on the unit circle. Okay, and if you think about the unit circle has 4 quadrants, and so because the values for sine repeat after you go all the way around the unit circle, which is 4 quadrants, we're going to make this 4th tick mark whatever the period is, and the period is how long it takes for the graph to repeat. So now we have to remember what the points looked like for sine. Okay, so for this instruction it says graph each parent function. So let's start by just graphing the parent function for sine. So the parent function for sine starts at 0, 0, because again, at 0, sine is 0. At pi over 2, sine is 1. At pi, sine is 0. At 3 pi over 2, sine is -1. And then at 2 pi, it's back to the middle. Okay, so those 5 dots are going to be the parent function for sine. Now, you don't necessarily have to remember like each of those values. If you can just remember how these dots are in relation to one another. So for sine, we're going middle, high, middle, low, middle. So it just has those 5 points. If you can remember those 5 points, then you'll be good to go. So that's the parent function of sine. And then really the only thing that changes for this graph is that it has an amplitude of 5. So instead of your graph going up to 1 and down to 1 at its highest and lowest, it's going to go up to 5 and down to 5. But these points in the middle are going to stay the same. Okay, so the way this graph's going to look is going to go from the middle up to 5, back to the middle, down to -5, and then back to the middle again. And you might as well fill in the rest of the graph because of all this space. So up here, down to the middle, middle, up here. Now, if you weren't able to print these notes off, which I was lucky that I had a blank copy of this in my folder because I cannot print at home, nor am I allowed back in the school building to print anything. So I understand that some of you might just be watching this video and not writing things along with me, and that's okay. Hopefully you're at least understanding what I'm showing you how to do. So there's the graph of 5 sine x. Now let's go ahead and take a look at number 8. Just finish this page off. Your amplitude here is going to be 3. And the period here is going to be 2 pi divided by 2. Okay, so the period for this graph is going to be pi. So like I said on that top one, whatever this period is, just go out to the 4th tick mark and label it with that value. Okay, so the 4th tick mark on your graphs is always going to be pi. All right, so if you're just drawing this at home on a piece of notepaper or something, just draw a rough sketch, put 1, 2, 3, 4 tick marks, and then I would put a pi. All right, so now, typically cosine, so this is cosine, so this is the only time where I really need to worry about whether this is sine or cosine. Typically cosine starts at its high point, goes to the middle, goes to its low point, goes back to the middle, then it goes back to the top. So it kind of has this like V-shape graph. All right. But because your amplitude is 3 here, when you go to put these points on paper, instead of making your graph start up at 1, just make it start up at 3. And then at the middle, make it go down to -3, back to the middle, and then up to +3. So it's going to look like this. If I really wanted to draw the parent function for cosine, I would have to draw all the way out to 2 pi and show that this graph really got horizontally compressed by 1/2. But for our purposes now, I just want you to understand, like, the period is how long it takes for this graph to repeat. So from 0 to pi, that's where you're going to fit 1 full cycle in. And then if you wanted to draw some more, if you wanted to draw another cycle, you could, right? But the initial graph for this looks like this. So compared to the parent function, it got vertically stretched by 3, and it had a horizontal compression of 1/2. Right, but it is going to be kind of, the way that I'm having you guys draw this, you're not really going to see the horizontal compression necessarily, because I'm kind of fudging it a little bit by having you plot this is the period. So just trust me.